Hello, this is Romanosky and George Curnew from Lugnutz. And let's not forget Aidan Goss, who's actually filming this.
Cinematographer par excellence,
Yeah.
behind the camera, never see him.
So what we have here between us is a 2022 BMW Z4
The SDrive 30i, they call it.
SDrive 30i, which of course has a 2-liter engine.
It's a 2-liter engine.
So we'll go through the video. We'll get George to give us his insight. He's a little bit better with late model stuff. I'm kind of stuck in the past. But George is up on his BMWs. And you also had the twin to this, the Supra.
I had the Supra with the 3-liter rather than the 2-liter.
Right.
Same architecture. Remarkably similar when you get underneath and look at the vehicles. Even the engine bays, the clamshell, for example.
Yeah, the same platform.
Same platform.
And you drove this back from Kelowna, right?
I drove this back from Kelowna earlier this week, actually, so I put
Right.
600, 700 kilometers on it.
So you've got seat time. You've got seat time
in
in both cars. Okay, well, we'll start the video with a little bit about the Z4, where it comes from, and so on, and then we'll do a walk around video. It is 9,000 kilometers. It's basically perfect. George has looked at 2,000 cars online and magnifies them up and looks at every pixel, and we wind up with cars from BC, unsurprisingly.
Quite often, yes, we do.
And so this is like a 9,000 kilometer car that was bought and serviced in Kelowna and then made its way out here, which is exactly what you want when you buy a used car in Calgary, because you want to get it somewhere else than Calgary. Anyway, so we'll go through the video. We'll let George tell you his experiences driving the Supra, how it compares to this. We'll go through this particular model, options, pricing, colors, etc. We'll do a paint meter test on it, just verifying that it has the original paint. We already done it. It is the original paint, but we'll verify that. And then a day when it's not raining, we'll even take it out for a drive and do a driving video. So,
Curiously, I had a 2022 Supra with the 3-liter and the ZF 8-speed in it. I actually really liked the car, and my wife was not fond of it at all. 2 reasons. One, it was very claustrophobic inside. It had sort of like looking out of a gun turret.
yeah, you couldn't see out of it.
You couldn't see out of it, and it was frantic. When you were on the accelerator hard, the tail end would dance around, and it was a lot of fun to drive from the driver's perspective. From the passenger, not so much fun.
Was it frantic because you were driving it, or was the car frantic?
It was 50-50, half me, half the car. So curiously, we're interested in getting a summer vehicle to replace the Supra. We always typically have a summer vehicle for doing jaunts into BC, and this car is a candidate. So I was really anxious to see what the 2-liter engine would be like on effectively the same chassis and compared to the 3-liter in the Supra. I was exceptionally pleasantly surprised. The tail happiness is dialed out. You can drive this car, very aggressively, and the back end will not stuff out. But it's quick. It's a 5-second 0 to 60 car. Same ZF 8-speed transmission. It's got 255 horsepower, but 294 pound-feet of torque in a car that weighs about 3,400 pounds, and so it's more than adequate. Very, very interesting to me is the cockpit at legal speeds and even a little faster is super quiet and virtually no turbulence with the windows up. You compare that to other cars, S2000 that I've owned, a Porsche Boxster, where there's quite a lot of turbulence inside the vehicle. This is way, way, way more comfortable to drive top down for long distances. I put 650 kilometers on it. 600 were the top down.
How did your wife do?
She wasn't with me.
Okay.
But I'm sure she would like it. I know what she likes, and I know what she doesn't like.
All right, so then, so this is a continuation of the BMW Z cars. It would have started with the Z1, the doors that sunk down into the sill from the late 90s, maybe?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
And then they came out with a Z3. Now, that's interesting to me because my mom had a Z3 in and around 2000. Or the early 2000s, and I was selling Mercedes then, so I was selling the SLKs, but I had also placed a deposit on the Porsche Boxster.
Yep.
I didn't take it because I bought a Type R Integra, which you also bought, which
Yes.
is actually how we met. But
Yeah.
anyway, we're not going to
We
bore you with
divert,
that. So in the 2000s, early 2000s, there was this kind of new breed of roadster. There was the Miata, which came out in 1990, which was kind of the first one. And then we had these three, we had the three German cars, SLK, the BMW Z4, and the Boxster, and they were always compared, okay? So, and I guess the S2000 as well was in that group. But it was a little bit sportier than the rest of them, and a little bit cheaper too.
Yeah, there was, yep.
So what's interesting, I think, is that like the BMW had the 4 and the 6. The 6 was over $60,000. The SLK, you could get them in the high 50s, but if you put a sport package on them, they were 70,000. And the Boxster, in theory, was 60, but probably most of them were 70 and 75. Okay, so fast forward 20 full years, and now we have the MSRP on this was what?
So the MSRP on this car in 2022, out the door with all the options on it, would have been 73,000.
Right.
Currently, it's up a little bit. If you were to option this car, and the only thing you can't get is this paint. This paint is now discontinued, which is unfortunate. It's a beautiful color.
Misano blue, if you're wondering.
Would be about 78,000, so it's come up a little bit.
Well, I think that's interesting because in 20 years, like the MSRP might have gone from, 55 or 58 or something like that to, what was it, 63?
The base MSRP was 64.
All right,
This
well,
was-
not
yeah.
that much. And then since COVID, it's gone up.
Yeah, it's gone up
It's
again.
gone up like
Yeah.
how much? Like all in all, what would the replacement cost?
It's gone
of
up. It's gone up. With options, $5,000 in 2 years.
this? Okay, so the first 20 years, it goes up $5,000.
Yeah.
And in the last
now,
5 years, it goes up
Yeah.
another $5,000. And this car, is only vaguely resemblant of the Z3 that I drove because my mom had it. I mean, in terms of comfort and convenience and refinement and performance and any metric at all, and it probably gets 30% better fuel economy as well.
So interestingly, I think though, what's changed here too is with the Supra, there were no options.
Yeah.
On this car has $10,000 worth of options. So they're kind of on the BMW side, they're doing a Porsche trick, and to get a well-equipped car, you've got to spend at least $10,000 in options.
Yeah.
With the Supra, it's out the door what it is. So
And what was the price range of the
Supra
Supra?
was low 70s.
Okay,
low
so not
70s.
much different. And these are, do I understand they're all made in Austria, Magna?
Yeah, Magna Steyr makes them all.
So that's a Canadian company, by the way, if you
yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, they make
Canadian-owned company.
Yep.
Okay, so we have, the performance on this car is, 0 to 60 in under
5-ish.
5 seconds, or maybe a bit
5 and a
under.
half, maybe.
Interestingly, in the progression, they had a retractable hardtop in the previous generation, and they reverted back to a canvas top, although you're saying it has fantastic refinement.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And when you go to a canvas top, of course, you save a lot of weight, and the weight that you're saving is from the top of the car, so the center of gravity improves. And also, it means you have a trunk again, because when you have a retractable hardtop, it normally takes out most of the trunk. So you wind up with a more practical car, a lighter car. I know Mercedes did that with their SLs, and now the trend was to get retractable hardtops for everything, and now the trend is back for soft tops.
So let me kind of just give you a quick rundown of the options that are in this car. There aren't a lot. It has the Misano blue paint, which was a stock standard paint color. Like I said, the new blue is very muted, not as attractive. This one has the M Performance package, which gives you the M Sport diff and the adaptive suspension.
So a locking rear differential?
Yeah.
Okay.
It also has all the black trim, the black wheels and the mirror caps, and on the door sills, the M badging. This one also has the blue stitching, the blue contrast stitching. And it has an option which is no longer available, which is the M seat belts with the M colors on them. No longer available on the 2024 option sheet. It also has a premium essentials package, which is a bunch of technology, some parking assistance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, all total, this one when it was new went out the door at $73,000. and change plus GST.
So I think in the last 5 or 6 years, they must have invented like special stitching machines for cars, because
Everything.
stitching used to be like, straight.
Yeah.
And now we have like stitching that's in like a fan, and we have colored stitching and,
Yeah.
and tricolor stitching. So somebody must have come up with some pretty clever machines, because now we're seeing this quite a lot. There's a lot of intricate detail that, I mean, you would have only seen on not even a Rolls Royce or something would have had this. So it lifts the interior of an all black car considerably, and just gives it a little bit of color, and of course ties into the exterior.
But this stitching absolutely complements and nearly matches the color of the paint. It's quite.
And is that just a happy coincidence, or do you get this color stitch with this paint?
No, you can get this color stitch with other color paint.
Oh, okay, so it just happens to match.
Happy coincidence.
Yeah, okay. The color comes from a seaside resort in Italy near Bologna, with a racetrack, if you're wondering where the name comes from.
Let me go quickly over the history of this car and the service records. As Lawrence mentioned earlier, it was born and lived in Kelowna. It was delivered sometime in early summer 2022, so there's still warranty remaining. We will confirm exactly, when the warranty was punched, but there's still a couple years at least, or a year or so more of warranty left. It had its last services in June and July of this year, so all the fluids checked, oil and filter changes, inspections, air filter fluids, steering, suspension. So a full check for like a pre-delivery inspection, they called, from the Kelowna dealer, and that was at 8,970 kilometers, so just before we purchased the vehicle. There is nothing in the Carfax that's out of the ordinary at all. It was serviced 3 times, 4,700, 81, and 8,900 kilometers, and 100% clean Carfax, one owner.
All right, so we have a 2-year-old car with a bit over 9,000 kilometers that's lived in Kelowna, that presumably has only seen nice weather. And when we show you the part of the video with the car on the hoist, we can show you the underneath of the car. There's not a speck of corrosion on it. So I'm very confident in saying that this car was a fair weather car. So bought and serviced at the same dealer in the middle of a desert in BC, without basically any flaw whatsoever. I can't find one.
Even though it's only 9,000 kilometers, a 9,000 kilometer Calgary car could conceivably have quite a number of rock chips. This has none. PPF here and on the hood, not on the A-pillars.
So not on the bonnet.
It has it on the bonnet. Yeah, it's just so well done.
Okay.
I can just feel the wrap underneath, right?
Okay.
We see varying levels of quality of PPF work.
Sure.
And it's nice when it fools us. So we're looking at it and we didn't realize that it had PPF. That's a good PPF.
It wasn't done on a Monday or a Friday. Prior to COVID, I spent 20 years selling, brand new fancy luxury cars. We'd always have demos. We'd usually run the demo for a year and 10,000 kilometers on it. I'd drive one, and a couple of the other managers might as well. They always had stone chips on them. We always had to replace the windshield. That's just life in Calgary driving a car, even if it was just a summer car. So in other places where they don't have gravel on the roads and don't have salt, you can drive a car for 10,000 kilometers and not get a rock chip like this car. That really just doesn't happen in Calgary, and that's why, after careful purchasing, we always seem to wind up with cars from British Columbia. It's not impossible to Calgary cars like this too. It's just pretty rare, okay? So we paint meter all our cars. Just because it has a clean Carfax, that doesn't mean that it wasn't repainted. It just maybe means that it didn't go through insurance, or the place that did it didn't report it. Okay, so we use a paint meter. I have it calibrated in micrometers. It's 1/1000th of a millimeter, and factory paint is normally between 1 and 200 micrometers. Some of the Japanese cars have quite thin paint, often closer to 100. Some of the European cars have paint that's closer to 200. We're looking for consistency. Sometimes when the paint's laid down, it flows to different, shapes of the car differently. So there's little differences, 50 micrometers or so on. When a car is repainted, we usually get 3s and 4s. Or when it has PPF, of course, the PPF is about the thickness of the original paint. So a panel that has PPF would also have numbers in the 3 to 4s, okay? So let's just go around the car. We're going to start with the clamshell, and this, the hood opens up in one big piece. So this has PPF on it, 336, 343, and 324. And of course, that's double the thickness of original paint. There's a 369, 384, 354, and 399. Okay, so we understand that. The front bumper is going to be plastic, so it won't read. I figured the bonnet was aluminum, and it does come up as non-ferrous. So can I assume that if it's going through 3M? I think so. Let's check that, so I don't make a mistake. Pretty sure the bonnet is okay, so let's do a walk around. We'll let Aidan do a slow pan in the vehicle. It's perfect, but let's demonstrate that.
Yep.
A note about the bonnet on this, the clamshell, George.
The clamshell is actually, Magna-Steyr had to pull out all the stops to get a stamping this large. It's the largest stamping that has ever been done. The clamshell is one single unit, and it wraps around the side of the car.
Yeah.
And when you bring up the hood, you look at it, and it's absolutely massive.
Well, Aidan and I know all about aluminum hoods and large stampings because on my Range Rover, I forgot to kind of forgot to like close it on Glenmore, and it came up, and we had to get another one. So, but actually, looking at the Rover outside, Aidan, it's actually bigger than the one on my Range Rover.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, anyway, that's kind of a funny aside. It scared us, right? Anyway, let's walk around the car. All the wheels are free of curb rash. There's no door dings. There's no scratches. There's no scuffs in any of the bumpers.
And those are one of the options for the M package, this style of black 10-spoke wheel, M wheel.
There isn't even any rust on the rotors. It's amazing.
No, nothing.
Even if you wash the car, it gets rust on the rotors.
Yes.
I made sure I went back and forth like 5 times just to make sure that I didn't get any.
And then the other thing, Aidan and I, when we were washing it, realized there is actually PPF on this lower panel, and there's a little bit of PPF here. So anywhere there's possibility of rock chips could come up on the side of the car, there is PPF.
So that's that's a $3,000 job, isn't it?
Yes, that would be.
From a BMW
that would be a
dealer,
$3,000 job. And it's exceptionally well done.
Yeah, and there's no marks on the carpet in the trunk. We can show you that as well. Doesn't look like anything's ever been in there.
Nope. Happily, in British Columbia, a front plate is required, and we have another BMW that they unfortunately put the front plate on. This one they didn't, so the front end of the vehicle is unmolested by license plate.
Well, I've never seen that before. That's good.
I'll have to say it's not perfect. We do have one tiny chip.
That's in PPF though.
That's in the PPF.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well,
Which would probably, if we got a heat gun, you could probably melt that out. So.
okay. Well, it did its job then. But yeah, you're not. Nobody's going to be disappointed with the condition of this car. It looks basically brand new. 2-liter twin power. What is that? A twin scroll turbo or?
I'm not sure.
Probably.
Yep. Most likely to get that power out.
And are all the engines shared between Toyota and
Yeah, the
BMW?
2-liter and the 3-liter are shared between BMW and Toyota.
The engine bay looks tidy. It's indistinguishable from new. And
Here's a curious bit of information. The Supras actually scan as BMWs. They have a BMW VIN.
Oh, really?
When
Okay.
I first got the car, I was looking to put it on one of the Autel scanner, and it wouldn't come up until I said, no, it's a BMW, and then it came up BMW Supra.
yeah, so probably the whole platform and probably all the inner panels are probably the same car. Huh?
Yeah.
And then they just
Just body.
bolt on new fenders, bolt on a different hood, bolt on a different front bumper, and make it a Supra.
Yep.
Is the dash architecture the same as well? Or does this have-
Similar, but this one has the BMWs have an updated iDrive and a dash, and the Supra actually has one generation back.
So they have different infotainment and stuff. Okay. And what might you look for on a 9,000 kilometer car? Well, you know, even in the showroom, cars can get scuffed up, you know, with the sill, with these finishing plates. So that, I mean, there's a couple tiny little marks there that you can pick up. And those pieces can be replaced anyway, but you don't have to. The carpets all look excellent. I mean, it is possible to get bolster wear if the owner is not that agile and kind of falls into the car. And we don't see any wear at all. Is it zero in on this? Is that, I mean, maybe the tiniest little bit there, but really, you know, impossible to reasonably fault, I would say. And, you know, it was perfectly clean when we got it, and it just looks like it was taken care of. Doesn't look like anything's ever been in the trunk. Sometimes you get some marks on the gear lever and the steering wheel from rings, but we don't see that here. The piano black finish on the center console, that can get scratched up if people sort of throw their wallet and their keys on it, and we don't see that at all. And over time, some of the white markings can come off of the buttons, but it's way too new for that to happen. So this is, you know, inside and outside, underneath the engine bay, the trunk. It presents as basically a new car. I can't reasonably...
One of the things that, again, differentiates this from the Supra is the characteristic thick rim BMW steering wheels. It falls much better to hand to me than in the Supra. The Supra is too thin. I like the center. So the airbag in the center just looks a little bit smaller.
Yeah, okay.
Just a nicer integrated design inside the Z4 from my perspective than in the Supra.
Yeah, well, I prefer it to sit in and drive as well. The Supra, it really felt like you were wearing a helmet when you were driving that car. I like to see out of the car.
So let's put the top up, show you how the top works.
Right, I can do that. It's 10 seconds, I read, and I think that is about right, isn't it? So
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
Start the car. Which way? This way? That way?
Yep. And it's fully automatic. You don't have to fiddle with the latches when it's done. It just drops down and locks itself. glass window, glass rear window with defogger.
I just
rack
noticed
mounted.
like LEDs in the door panels too, huh?
Yep.
LEDs must have come down in price because now
So-
they're everywhere.
Yeah. It has the ambient lighting, so we've set the ambient lighting to blue
Oh, you can change the color.
to match the color.
Well,
of the
aren't we thorough?
Yeah.
That's the way we work here at Lugnutz,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. We match the color of the LED to the paint as
Yeah.
a matter of course. Okay, so let's get a look at the undercarriage of this 2022 BMW Z4. We're with only 9,000 kilometers and driven in BC and in reportedly only in good conditions. We can assume, we're assuming that the undercarriage is clean, but let's take a closer look. The first thing that we do when we're evaluating a car is underneath is to check out the front spoiler. On the sports cars, it's vulnerable, and often they bump into curbs and get scraped up, and you can't tell if it has its wheels on and it's on the ground because it's too low. So let's have a look at this. So we can see that we have these sacrificial black plastic pieces, and you can see that there is just the tiniest little bit of rash on the bottom of these, but the pieces are still flexible, they're still attached, and they're still supple. We'll look at the one on the other side, and yeah, and that's doing its job. It's supposed to do that. So it protects the bottom of the front spoiler, which is actually really easy to scrape up and to crack, and not that easy to fix. Okay, so it's basically perfect. If I run my fingernail along it, you can see some very, very shallow scrapes on the very bottom of the car. So it doesn't get a lot better than that. There's no paint chips, and there's no cracks and no marks really worth mentioning. Okay, so the next thing that we can look at is the fasteners. Now, obviously the cars today, most of the high-performance cars anyway, have belly pans. And they're mostly for aerodynamic purposes, but it does make servicing the engine a little bit more difficult. And there is, many fasteners which have to be undone to drop the pans to do various jobs. I assume this will give us access to the oil filter, which is a nice touch. Many cars don't have that. But if the car has been serviced a lot, what we often see is these black plastic fasteners. They're not very durable. Maybe you can take them in and put them out twice before they break. So we often see these missing or loose. We often see them over tightened, and if they get over tightened, it cracks the edge of the under tray, and they're susceptible to damage. So you can look underneath what appears to be a really clean, low mileage car, and you can see that the front there, the bottom of the bumper is all scraped up, and all the plastic under trays are cracked, and the fasteners are missing, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't see that with this car. It is about as perfect as you could expect. Okay, so the next thing we can look at is the state of all the fasteners. If the car is to corrode, you'll see it first on the brake discs and on the nuts and bolts, particularly the areas which are threaded, okay? And so looking around at this car and looking at the fasteners really carefully, they look brand new basically, okay? And even the steel brake rotors don't have any corrosion, and they don't even have any corrosion in the center. That's very unusual. They look brand new, and even well looked after cars that are driven a little bit in the rain will corrode in the center of the axle ventilation. Radial ventilation? I think that's axle ventilation. And we don't see any, and then this part as well, I guess this is aluminum on the BMWs, and it looks like it's pinned in. So this would be the steel, and that's an aluminum hat. So I haven't seen that design before. interesting. Aluminum to save weight, and then steel for its ability to absorb heat. Okay, and then we can look inside the wheel arches. This is like, again, we can look for damage. We can look to see if all those fasteners are there and just the general state of it. And I think we can all agree that that's about as perfect as one can expect with a used car. And looking around the other side, again, the fasteners are completely corrosion-free, as is the brake disc, showing almost imperceptible wear, which is even light for 9,000 kilometers. You can go through brakes in 20,000 kilometers if you're really hard on the car. Okay, so all of that looks basically perfect. Now we can also look to the jacking points. You can see that it's jacked on these pads here. If the car, you know, was serviced a lot and if people didn't take a lot of care what they were doing to line everything up properly, then the jack the lifting arm for the hoist can then contact the bodywork, and you can damage the bodywork. If the pad is on misaligned, you can crack that plastic under tray, and that happens actually quite a bit. You know, it takes a fair amount of time and expertise and a little bit of patience, because every car is a little bit different, to line them up on the hoist properly. And you might have to go around the car a few times to get it right and get the proper fittings and so forth, so that it lifts just on the jacking point, but then doesn't contact the sill or the under tray. And it can be a little tricky. And if somebody's in a hurry or having a bad day, you know, they can just jack it up, and then you'll find these plastic under trays crack, or worse. I've seen with some aluminum cars, I've seen them jacked up improperly, and it effectively writing off the car because the tub can't be repaired. Okay, so none of that's the case with this. It's been jacked up properly. It probably hasn't been jacked up that much because it only has 9,000 kilometers on it. And we can get a good look at the suspension and the rear brake disc. And we can see all the original stickers, the corrosion-free fasteners, the inner wheel arch, and it looks pretty close to brand new. Okay, it's, you know, the under trays are all beautifully preserved. There's no corrosion on the exhaust or on the muffler. No staining on the rear diffuser. You know, we just basically it basically looks new. Like you might expect a car that was carefully driven in a nice climate with only 9,000 kilometers, which this is. Okay. So, yeah, so this is a 2022 BMW Z4, only 9,000 kilometers from BC. I can virtually guarantee you that it never saw any kind of salt. It probably never even saw inclement weather. It's not even rusting in the places where cars rust when you wash them. Okay, so we're going to wash it now. Probably be some surface rust on the rotors when we're done with it. But anyway, it's about as good as it gets on this lightly used 2022 BMW Z4. Okay, well maybe that brings us to a summary of this car then. We have a car that's really good value. One, because the MSRP and options and freight and PDI and everything else the manufacturer and the dealers try to stick you with after COVID has gone up. So we start at a reasonable price. Not that much more than what these cars were going for 20 years ago, despite vastly improved comfort and convenience options and performance. We have a car from a dry climate with only 9,300 kilometers on it that's been dealer serviced with no stories and a clean Carfax, and recently looked at by the dealer just before we got it, that is basically free from any sort of meaningful fault and even dirt underneath the car in the engine bay, etc. So that just makes it kind of the used car people want to buy.
So this, I think, would be, its sweet spot would be for a couple looking to do summer long distance or medium distance road trips in absolute comfort. This ticks all the boxes for that kind of a car, if that's what you're looking for.
That sounds like what you're looking for.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
But you're also looking for the M2.
My wife will need to see this. She hasn't seen this yet, so.
We have to sell some cars, George.
Yeah, probably.
Can't keep them all.
Can't keep everything.
Anyway, so hope that's informative. It's a nice car. Nobody's going to be disappointed with it. So with that, please like and subscribe. And thanks from Lawrence Romanosky, George Curnew, and why don't we get a shot of Aiden here, so he can be on YouTube as well. Here's Aiden, and there we go. Thanks, everybody.